Hello there and welcome back to part 2. So in part 1 I hope you found a few things there that may have been of interest to you. We're just going to go for a ride now and see what else occurs and discuss a few other issues and just see how we get on really. One of the rules that we teach at all levels of training really is the 2-second rule. And that's a really great little tool for working out how close we should be to the vehicle in front. So those of you that don't know, all we do is we find a fixed point on the road somewhere, whether it be a shadow or a telegraph pole, whatever it might be, a mark on the road. When the first vehicle passes over that point, we count to 2 seconds, and we shouldn't have passed that fixed point before those 2 seconds have elapsed. And of course in the wet we're going to double it to 4 seconds. So only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. I'm virtually on the nose between that and the grey car in front. Of course you can see the grey car isn't on the nose with the 2-second rule on the blue car in front. Only a fool breaks, and that's where he ends up with his. So you can see he is way too close to that vehicle in front. So on a motorcycle we've got no real advantage for being too close to the vehicle in front. We don't need to tailgate other road users. Apart from the fact it's highly dangerous for your own personal safety, we can generally accelerate. Okay, I know little bikes, 125s haven't got great acceleration, but then don't take risks. But generally speaking, motorcycles accelerate very quickly. So we don't need to drive right up the rear of the vehicle in front to achieve anything, because if we need to make ground and need to make progress, we can do so quite safely and happily because our vehicle is very capable. So I'm glad to see that the grey vehicle now is more of a reasonable distance. Only a fool breaks 2-second rule. A little bit close, but he's not far off in all fairness, and it's a dry day. You know, it's quite difficult with these cameras and these videos. When you're doing recordings, distance looks very strange because of the lenses. It's very difficult to judge how close we are to things. It can be very deceptive. So visually on these videos you can't always get the exact perspective of it, but never mind. So this road's been recently resurfaced and it's the usual nice quality with gravel left everywhere, no road markings. And so when it comes to stopping distances on these roads, we just need to make sure we extend them. I'm just going to drop my visor down because I'm also consciously aware of grip being flicked up from the vehicles in front. You don't really want that to hit you in the face. And you've got to be consciously aware that, you know, the vehicle travelling behind you may not decide to increase the stopping distances. Perhaps because they're in a hurry or they're just oblivious, and therefore it would take them longer to stop before they went into the back of you. Only a fool breaks the 2-second rule. So yeah, I was just self-checking there, and I'm just over 2 seconds. I'm not at 4, probably 2 and a bit. And sometimes, you know, when you use the 2-second rule, you look at it and you think, wow, I'm absolutely miles away from that vehicle in front. I must be able to get a little bit closer, surely, you know. I think we need to self-check from time to time. It's very easy to lose touch with what is reality and what you perceive to be okay. I know that when we read about stopping distances in the highway code, you know, they were calculated a long time ago and a lot's changed. Tyres have changed, brakes have changed, for the better. But we have to have a bit of guidance from somewhere. You know, on roads like this, one of your biggest enemies for putting yourself at risk from being hit from behind is not seeing the hazard ahead soon enough, not reacting to it. if you're really on the ball and you're reacting early, you're giving yourself a much better chance of defence, which allows for other people's, you know, errors in judgment and driving, if you like. You're building in that extra safety zone because you are on the ball. You don't want to be relying on other people to protect you. We've said it before, you can't. You can only rely on yourself to protect yourself. You see, this bend here is quite blind. What if you had to get stopped around this bend because of a traffic queue, set of traffic lights or something? Once you get to a certain point about here, and some bends are a lot worse than that one, you really run the risk of someone coming around the corner and smacking into the back of you. And I remember many years ago there was a collision just as that out in Sussex, where around a bend there'd been a set of temporary traffic lights. Well, they were road signed. There was about 4 vehicles waiting at the lights around this bend, and the car coming up the road behind didn't take any notice of the signs that said roadworks, traffic lights. It just carried on at its speed, came round the corner, round the bend, and then at the last minute saw the vehicle that was stationary, slammed the brakes on and went straight in the back of the car and catapulted that one into the front of it. If you ever find yourself stuck just around a bend in a traffic queue, try and move yourself somewhere where that can't happen to you. It may be you need to tuck into the left a little bit more. It may be you try and filter as soon as you can and get away from the rear of the queue. If you've got plenty of warning, just slow it down a little bit. And you know, it's very difficult if you can't see where the end of the traffic queue is, because what I was going to say is try and actually not stop around the bend. But if you can't see exactly where that is, you very often don't get that luxury, unless you can see vehicles through the trees. And in which case you could stop a bit short, couldn't you, and control the traffic behind you that way. So there's always options to be had. So you can see here where I'm being stopped by this car turning right. I'm going to stop short and keep a good check on my mirror, because then vehicles coming around that bend can see me, and as luck would have it, no one's came and I'm able to move. But interestingly, it just shows how you can get caught out with stuff if you're not very careful, and how it can not work in your favour. So where's my safe escape route as we approach this set of traffic lights? So got quite a low curb there to the left. That would be easy. I could just pop up the pavement. I could also go offside if I needed to. Of course, if you're going to go up the pavement, you've also got the risk of pedestrians appearing out of gateways or places maybe. Very difficult, isn't it? Unless you start thinking about things and observing well, one problem could lead to another one. So another area we've got to be very careful of is when we're turning from a major road to a minor road. So I'm going to turn right in a moment, and this road's not too narrow, so I've got to make sure that the vehicle behind doesn't cause me a problem. I was able to actually turn in very, very promptly, so that was fine. When you've got to slow right down and wait, remember that vehicle behind is going to come alongside you, and very often if the road's quite wide, turning right's not so much of an issue, because they're always going to go onto the left hand side of you anyway. But turning left can be a bit more of an issue. And the reason turning left can be more of an issue is generally we're going to just be in the centre of our lane, and there's going to be a vehicle behind us who's going to have to slow. So I've got one behind me and I intend turning left. So I can have an early signal. I've got to look at their proximity. That's good. A little bit of brake light and then gently into the turn. And that was a little bit of a tight turn. He got fairly close to me, but it wasn't intimidatingly close. So if you're turning from a major road to a minor road, remember those mirror checks. Although we do the initial mirror signal manoeuvre routine, we need to keep checking the mirrors until we're actually well off of that road. You know, I see a lot of students in the past, they'll go mirror, signal, manoeuvre, and they'll position to turn, then they'll forget about their rear, but you've still got cars coming up behind you and potentially doing things to you, and you're forgetting about them. So try not to. I think that's one of the drawbacks with using mirror signal manoeuvre, is we can sometimes forget that we have to keep checking the mirrors. So as we come into this stop junction here then, where do I position? Where are my escape routes? It's a fairly narrow road, isn't it? Slight escape route to the right, up to a point. Maybe up the pavement to the left, although I'd have to go up the curb, which could be an issue. Now, when a lot of people are waiting at junctions like this, they forget what's behind them, and that's a really bad thing to do. I mean, that guy was lovely and kind, he let me out, I didn't have to loiter at that junction. But it's the same here, you know, people get very preoccupied with waiting at with looking at the main road before they enter the new road, and of course that's the high priority of risk, isn't it? You know, you can't join the major road if it's not safe. But don't forget, you must keep checking your mirrors, you must keep your awareness up of what is happening behind you whilst you're waiting to join a new road. It is not sufficient just to look up and down that road. So we're in a 20 limit now, and one thing I've really noticed that encourages tailgating more than anything is complying with the speed limit, especially in a 20 limit. And okay, the traffic today is pretty heavy, so we're lucky to get to 20, you know, we're down to 15-10 at the moment. But I have seen a lot of these 20 limits, and you look at the roads and you think this really shouldn't be a 20. It seems to be the latest road safety, in inverted commas, fad, and you're doing 20, trying to comply with the law, and you're just annoying everyone behind you, and they're right up your ear end trying to push you on, and you know, it's not helpful for road safety at all. Inappropriate speed limits are unhelpful, I'm afraid to say. So when I'm travelling in very slow traffic queues, yet again, I don't want to get too close. I've seen a lot of motorcycles right up the rear of that vehicle in front. You don't want to be doing it. You really don't. That vehicle could reverse on you, couldn't it? It could stop suddenly, it could break down. You want to have a bit of option, because I find it gives me time as well to think, can I filter? Where do I want to go? Gives me a chance to think by not being too close. So as I come into a stop at this junction, I've got the clear lane behind me, which is always something to be cautious of. So I've got one red vehicle coming up behind me. It's never first, just in case I need to move. No, he's reacted and stationary, so I'm going to relax back into neutral. But I'm still going to keep a good check. Of course, I am in the centre of my lane, which makes me vulnerable, but actually the right lane's not that wide. Very nice, Suzuki. So I don't want to be too far to the left or to the right, because it still will cause me a problem of being hit from behind, and my lane positioning might not be very helpful. You know, if you move yourself in too many extremities, your lane positioning is going to possibly mislead other road users, which is not something that we want. So what alternatives have I got to position behind this vehicle then? You know, I've got a vehicle coming up behind me, and to get close to this in the middle of our lane is not a good idea. What escape routes have I got? And he's coming up quite quick actually, isn't he? So that's why I like a little bit of room. So we can just stay in the middle of our lane and keep back. If we've got a lot of room to the left or to the right, we could even position the motorcycle slightly offset to either side, maybe at a slight angle. Being dead square to the back of a car and being close is a no-no in my opinion. It gives you no options to escape, and if that vehicle were to break down, for example, you couldn't ride away easily. But if the vehicle behind fails to stop, where are you going to go? You've got to be considerate though. You've got to think, if you position yourself to the left or to the right, what does the vehicle following behind think you're going to do? And will that driver push up alongside you and cause you a problem? So everything is always a matter of degree, isn't it? You've always got to offset advantage versus risk. So this is a great example of where we can use like a fend off position really. I'm slightly angled towards the left, away from the back of that car, checking my mirrors. I've got a whole lane to go into. So, you know, a lot of people might stick their bike into neutral. I mean, I can do it, there's no one behind at all, but I'm prepared to put it back into gear should I need to. So I've got a lovely escape route to the left. I wouldn't want to go to the right, there's a lot of gravel there and it'll put me on the wrong side of the road. So this is a much nicer option. And even if a vehicle does fill that lane, the way that vehicle there is positioned in its lane, I do have a little bit of room to the near side of it. Okay. So we've got the blue vehicle coming up, rear obs, yeah, and we're all good. Just straighten the bike out and off we go. So pedestrian crossings are another area where you can be very easily shunted at the rear. Although it's a 20 limit, the blue vehicle behind's fairly keen and they are going to cross, so I'm going to show a nice early brake light and just control that vehicle behind me into the slowing or stop if necessary. So whether it's a zebra or a pelican or any of the other pedestrian crossings, high risk, got to guard your rear. It's like when people give way to other road users when it's not their right of way, and of course it's lovely to have a bit of courtesy on the road. But if you stop too suddenly and the vehicle behind's not ready for you, that's what's going to happen. They're going to go straight in the back of you. So we do need to be very mindful of these various areas. You know, we love to be courteous if we can, well some of us do. But before you let that other vehicle or pedestrian cross, make sure you know what's happening behind. Okay, so what is the takeaway from all of this at the end of the day then? So when you do your rear observations lesson, and when you think about rear observations, they're not just glances in the mirror for the sake of it. You're actually assessing what is going on behind you, what isn't going on behind you, and actually what could actually happen to you. Don't just glance at the vehicle behind you, also be aware of what is beyond you and coming up behind you, because in a few moments that will be with you. And the whole purpose of those rear observations is so you can make a decision when you come to deal with certain hazards. And in particular when we're looking at not being struck from behind, junctions, roundabouts, traffic queues, traffic lights, they're all places where you're going to be slowed and potentially brought to a stop, and that is when you're really vulnerable. So as you approach these hazards, you need to have a strategy. When you're waiting at a junction or you're waiting to enter a roundabout, yes, you do have to focus massively on traffic on the major road ahead, but don't forget your mirrors. Don't forget to be aware of who is coming up behind you. So I hope some of the information in this video has been useful. Until next time, ride safe and take care.